Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to go over something pretty important and special and different, and I can't even think of the right words because there are no words. But this is for at least the foreseeable future, the last episode of Hacking Your Leadership.
Bum, bum, ba, bow. Yes, it is. I think it's we've had a lot of years in this game and doing this show, and we know we've talked about it multiple times. When do you decide, and when do you figure it out, and when do you kind of evolve or change or move on or stop? And there's never a shortage of leadership topics to talk about. But I also know that as we've grown and developed, and as we've found things to get into and things to work on, there's always a good time to take a pause. And after this many years of consistent episodes, it felt right to get to this point of a yearly anniversary of the show, and then say, hey, let's take a break and let's figure out what happens from here.
Yeah, I think it's important to sometimes figure out the things in our lives, what value they add, and sometimes it's hard to figure that out when you're in that rhythm, right? Sometimes you have to change things up to figure out if you've done the right thing or not, and that might be the case. There might be massive public backlash from all of our fans saying, get your butts back in the studio and keep going because we depend on this. And it might look a little different. It might be a few months, it might be longer, it might not be ever. But there's my favorite band of all time is U2, and it's kind of cheesy, but a long time ago the lead singer of U2, Bono, said that the band was going to break up. This was like back in 1989. He said it's time to go away and dream it all back up again. And with the idea fully in his mind that it might not be ever, that dreaming it all up again might not mean that it comes back at all. And I think that's kind of where I am right now, or where we are right now, which is just that we don't know what the next iteration will look like or if there will be one. But we're trying to figure out what value this show adds to our own lives from the investment. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about just the emotional capital and the fact that as working parents of young children and limited time, trying to figure out where it fits in and the value that it brings and the trade-offs in time that it comes with. And it's got to be worth it. It's got to be worth it, and it has to be something that we want to continue doing because of the value that it brings. And we're trying to figure out what that looks like, and if it does still fit within our lives in some way, and that'll take some time to figure out.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think over the years, one of the questions that I get constantly from people just around podcasting is like, how do you guys do it? How are you so consistent? How have you done it for so long? How do you make sure that you've always got content and this type of thing? And I think we've done a really nice job of just refining it. And, from the first episode, we were like, we just want to talk about it. We don't want any script. We don't want to overproduce this. We don't want to over edit this. We just want to talk about leadership and answer questions and provide our perspective. And I think over the years, we've done a really good job of getting that down to just hit the record button. Here's the topic. Let's go. But also to your point, I think that there's other vehicles. We've tried some different ways of also continuing to talk about leadership, and whether that's we started interviewing guests, we started doing writing and newsletters and
Clubhouse,
talking
Clubhouse.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, Clubhouse audio, right? Just a lot of stuff that we did to just share our perspective and provide what we thought would be helpful for people. And there are a ton of other leadership people that are in the space that we are fans of, that we like, that we often reference or share. And that's another part of this platform that we've talked a lot about, is how can we use this to help others that have great messages get their messages out there. That's always been really important. And I think that's something that, we're not going to delete the channel. We're not going to delete the library. These episodes, and there's a lot of them, will continue to exist in a space where people can listen to them and check them out. And who knows, from time to time, we might feel the need to, put some content out, whether it's ours, somebody else's, just to be able to continue to share in the initial idea of the show, which is like, how do we do our best to share thoughts, perspectives, and advice, to other leaders in the work that you do in leading people. And I think, in our 8 years of doing the show, a lot of our own leadership has matured and solidified, and our perspectives have sharpened as a result of the conversations that we've had with each other and with guests that we've had on.
I agree completely with that. I think the most, to me, the most valuable content for the show comes from our own personal experiences. And so, it can start out with a listener question or an article we saw online or a video that we saw that resonated with us. But the reason it resonated with us, or the reason why the question was something that we thought it would be a nice thing to answer, is because one of us experienced something in our own lives, in our own leadership journey, that we can say, oh, you know what? I have some perspective on this. Like, I went through something similar, or sometimes the exact same thing. And I can share how either I made the wrong move and learned from it, or made the right move by luck, or made the right move by skill because I had been in this situation before. And like, it all stems from just the experiences that we have. And that's where the content becomes most valuable. And, that content, or those experiences, continue to happen over the last 8 years as we were talking about them, which is why there was really never a shortage of topics, because it wasn't just about, like, it's not like a sitcom where you have to just find a new trope or a new joke to write every week. This is just thinking about real life and the interactions that we have with the people who report to us, the people we interact with in our own leadership lives, and then talking about those experiences in a way that is meaningful and that shows the learnings that we have had from them. And I think that's why the show has resonated with so many people, is because it's not made up. It's based on the real things that happen in our lives, and the vulnerability that comes with, sharing those learnings and those missteps, especially.
Yeah, exactly. I think, sharing places where we've made mistakes or things that we've learned, sharing, passionately about, processes and strategies and approaches to leadership. And, I think over the years, we've had all kinds of conversations, from like funny times of things that have happened, to silly stuff that happens in different industries, to serious topics that have a real impact on people, to topics that over the years have evolved in how we see them in society, how we see them in the workforce, to leaders and maybe strategies and discussions that we had 8 years ago, to then getting through, 2020 and COVID and all that type of thing, to then kind of the new iteration of that. And we talked a lot about what things have really solidified, and then what things are new, and what things are wide open, and how is, how are people, the workforce, the culture now in a place where we're holding leaders accountable in a very different way. And in a good way, which is just raising the bar of what should be expected from having a leader that's supposed to be there to inspire and motivate, help support people do the work that they're doing. And I think that's been a really fun part of the journey, is just being a part of conversations that I think were relevant really closely in the moment. Like I immediately get brought back to we did an episode about a hurricane that happened in Florida. And
oh yeah,
it was was
the
it
whole,
a Pizza
like,
Hut
come to work anyway kind of thing.
Yeah, it was like a pizza place that was just like,
Yeah.
we don't care, go to work, right?
Yeah.
And we just talked about that, and it was like, how ridiculous is that? And that was something that we read in the news, and there's just those moments that happened that I think really skyrocketed what is the expectation of leadership, and what are the right things to do, or the right way to handle things. And I think that's probably been the most fun for me, is just the amount of listeners that have reached out in so many different ways, continue to share our content. It just happened last week. Somebody shared one of our short clips on LinkedIn and talked about how important this subject was and how it was something they struggled with and they worked through. So, I just, it's been a fun journey, but I think I've just enjoyed watching the conversations that we've had continue to echo through other listeners and leaders that feel the same way or want to share their perspective on some of the topics.
Yeah, the example you gave just now of that hurricane thing, it kind of made me think of something that I think is important to kind of discuss, and that's that it's hard not to think that our experience in leadership, both as a leader of people and as someone who has reported to leaders throughout our journeys. Like we both always had a boss at any given time. There's always been one, sometimes more than one. And the examples of like that hurricane in Florida, it's really difficult sometimes not to think that our own perspective or our own experience as employees reporting to leaders, it's hard not to think that that's the norm, because I think both of us have been very fortunate in our leadership journeys that we've had good bosses and bad bosses. I can definitely place them in a hierarchical order, right? I've learned from the good ones, and I've learned sometimes even more from the bad ones, but none of them have ever risen to that level of like, I don't care about your safety. Come to work at a pizza place, and. Yep. And because of that, it's sometimes it's hard not to chuckle at that a little bit and think like it's almost satire, but it's not. And I think over the years, the instances of that happening are far less than it would have been, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I think a lot of it has to do with, the visibility to things like that happening. If that interaction happened between the pizza place owner and the employee in 1982, no one would ever know about it because there'd be no place to share it with everybody, right? And that would just happen. And nowadays it gets shared, and there's a level of social accountability that at least has helped keep some leaders on the straight and narrow a little bit, even if not for the right reasons, sometimes doing the right thing for the wrong reasons is still the right thing, right? You're still doing it. Yep. And I think that has kind of moved the needle on the experience employees have, but there are still areas where it is not good. There's still places across the workforce where the employee experience is not great. And I think anytime that is the case, all roads lead back to leadership. All roads of a negative employee experience lead back to the effectiveness of the leadership team in that organization and what they're doing or how they're prioritizing the employee experience and whether or not they do it all to begin with.
Yeah, no, it's a great call, and I think it's yeah, I'm just stuck in this space of just thinking about like how do you possibly provide thank yous or gratitude to all of the people that have like pushed our show forward, from whether it be guests that said yes right away. I think of we for a long time we didn't do guests, and then we really wanted to build some space to say like, well, we want to talk to the people that we want to talk to, and then it was kind of like nerve-wracking. Well, let's reach out to the people that we want to talk to, and the fact that so many of them said yes, and they're like, yeah, of course, absolutely, like that was tremendous. I think of all of the listener questions and the text messages, DMs, the screenshots that were sent to me about people listening to the show, just like the continual push forward from people to say like, hey, love this, love that, I'm using it this way. We've had leaders from organizations reach out and say, hey, we've put together a collection of what we think are the 10 shows that resonate most with our workforce, and we've turned this into like a training document. Is that cool? And we're like, yeah, of course. Like, like whatever you want to do. Like the whole point of this is like, yeah, use it for whatever you can. But like, I just think about all of those listeners and people that helped to push us to continue to like evolve what we talked about, evolve, the way that we were doing our episodes, the guests interviews, the Pay It Forward Fridays, the employee engagement Thursdays, the thoughtful Thursdays. Like, we did so many things that I think were driven by people that listen to the show. And I think that's something that's cool about the podcasting space when you have that connection with an audience, is that you can adjust and move and pivot to the places that they want you to go to, and I think that's been a fun part of the journey. It's just continuing to have people that have an influence on how I'm thinking about leadership that I don't even know. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Not alone don't work with every day, but complete strangers and thousands of them saying, "Hey, you should talk about this," or we need to talk about that, and things that maybe I hadn't even considered in my own leadership, or things that I hadn't come across yet that I now had to have an opinion on and had to think through. And I think that was super fun and helpful.
Yeah, it has made me better at leadership, right? There's just the interactions with our audience and the things that we've had to contemplate and think about, and it's. We talk often on the show about the importance of leading with values, right? About figuring out what is important to you and then leading with that, and allowing that to guide your decision-making process as a leader. And then if you allow it to guide your decision-making process as a leader and the outcome isn't what it needed to be, then does that mean that you didn't really use that as a guide, or does it mean that your values need to tweak or change a little bit based on the time? Are they not well defined yet because of the experience or lack thereof that you have in the workforce? Like, all these things happen over time, and as the more you do it, the better a process it becomes, and the process of doing that through the lens of the things that our listeners have asked of us, and kind of thinking, okay, this hasn't happened to me, but it's happening to one of our listeners who's asking for advice on this. How would I deal with this? And it's a lot harder to do that hypothetically than it is if it's really happening, because you actually have to make the decision. But it really has helped me test my values as a leader by putting those situations through the kind of the mill of my personal values to see if the outcome aligns with what is A, appropriate for the situation, and B, doesn't butt heads with my values, right? It kind of checks my values in the process to see if they are still right, if they're still appropriate, or if I need to tweak them. Because if you're never tweaking your values, it doesn't mean that you're steadfast. It means that you are, unwilling to change to changing times. Because your values should change over time. They should just change thoughtfully and methodically and based on real, true evidence, not whimsically. But they should not remain the same, for forever. And these examples that we've gotten from our listeners they've definitely caused me to think through my values and what's important to me, and make tweaks or changes when appropriate. And I think it's been very valuable to me too, not just to our listeners.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this chapter for Hacking Your Leadership.
Before we go, I just I know that when we talked about doing this, Lorenzo, you said that you really wanted to put some time and effort into thinking through, kind of like if you had one piece of advice, like one nugget of advice for our listeners that, for somebody who is going into leadership or new to leadership, or if they're just struggling with leadership in general, the thing that you would want to have on the wall in front of you every day that you could look up at and read to yourself, and kind of like a rock or an anchor of leadership advice to our listeners. You said you felt it was really important to kind of have that kind of nugget to let our audience kind of take away at the end of the last episode. And I really like that idea. And I know you've already shared it with me, and I think it's fantastic. I think you did a really great job of kind of narrowing it down and thinking about something where the rubber really meets the road. that our listeners can take with them as they depart from the show for a while. And so I'll let you take it away and end the episode with this kernel. But this is really fantastic stuff here.
I mean, we've had these 1 minute hacks for the entire period, and I kind of felt that like this is really important to kind of like 8 years, like over 1,000 episodes, how you slice it, decades of leadership experience between the two of us, really trying to boil this down to say like, what do you say and how do you help to guide someone into their future? How do you help to take someone who's been a leader for a long time and give them something that may reshape the way they think about leadership and can leave an impressed and a very like kind of an impression of people that they will take with them forever. We always have those quotes that we heard some people say that they just stick with us and they help us in those really tough times.
Yep.
And so, what I would say is like, boiling it all down, all that time, all that tenure, all that experience, all the conversations that we've had, the tens of thousands of minutes and hours of dialogue. For me, leadership really just comes down to this one very simple statement, and that is